Hi, I'm edA-qa mort-ora-y, and today I'd like to look at an article I found over on Dev2 called 25 Tips for New Developers, Advice from a Mostly Self-Taught Engineer by Spittel. Overall, the advice is pretty good, and I agree with most of it. There are a few places where I will diverge, but I'd like to go over this point by point. Number one, have your reason and stick to it. The point we're making here is that you have a reason you got into programming, and don't forget about that. You don't want to forget about this because at times it's going to become very stressful. You're not going to know what to do, and you're going to be lost and confused. And this is all part of programming. But if you have that reason in your mind, it gives you something to look forward to. It gives you that reason to push forward. And once you push by those stumbling blocks, you realize, hey, this is really worth it. I'm in here, I'm doing it for what I want. Number two, build a solid foundation. I'm a little uncertain of the title here because the description talks about math, in particular algebra. And while I agree you should know algebra to understand programming, I'm actually going to disagree in several cases. You can get into it without knowing that much, but if you actually want to get into the depth of how algorithms work and how certain logic works and how computers work, you really should know it. So it's not a bad thing, but if you don't have that knowledge, don't let it stop you. Just realize you'll have to pick it up later. Number three, find a community. I'm going to have to agree with this one very strongly. Even if you're the loner type that likes to work alone, you don't like talking to people, then find a community appropriate for that. Find the one where you can lurk online, where you can just read things, where you don't have to participate. But for a lot of people, you need a way to write, you need a way to reach out, and you want to say, well, I'm having trouble, I can do this, or you just want to show off. If you need that motivation, definitely find a community that motivates you correctly. And this is a very important point. Otherwise, again, when you get frustrated, programming can become very demotivating, and you just have to push through. Having that community there supports you and helps you along the way. Number four, break down problems into smaller ones. Yeah, there's not a lot about to say that one. Yeah, if you can't do that, you're in trouble. Number five, pseudocode. Okay, I'm going to disagree with this one quite a bit, but not because it's a bad idea what she says inside of it, but because I don't like pseudocode in particular. I like just doing random shit. I mean, draw diagrams, visualize wherever you want. You don't have to call it pseudocode, but there's a lot of ways you can do it. Try to find a way to visualize problems that are helpful to you before you go into code. But I mean, even some problems can be done directly in codes, but I think the key here is that don't necessarily think strictly at the level of code. Find a way to think that isn't code, whether it's pseudocode, visualization, diagrams, or just staring at the ceiling. Find a way to do that. Number six, embrace the cycle of learning. Yeah, it's a strong yes for me. Just get used to it. Programming is about learning. Every day learning. And when you think you've learned it all, something new comes around, and you just have to learn. If you're unwilling to learn, just turn back now. Number seven, start with free resources. I think this one kind of goes without saying. It's kind of hard to avoid the free resources online, but you have to watch out. A lot of the resources are not very helpful. There's a lot of stuff written out there that's just simply not any good. So when you do stick with the free ones, at least check around to see if its reputation is any good. See if you find if you're getting along with it, whether other people find it's okay. So it's okay to stick with the free stuff. Just be very attentive to whether it's any good or not. Number eight, find your niche. I don't know. I get bored in a niche. Why would I want to do one thing the whole time? I guess if you're trying to further a career, you'll find that niche, but you have to be aware that niches come and go. I think you have to learn to find a way and be adaptable. Maybe find a theme you like, a general direction, but I don't think pigeonholing yourself is actually a wise idea. Number nine, get good at pattern recognition. Definitely. Unfortunately, that's easier said than done. Pattern recognition can be very hard for certain people. Even if you do, as the advice says, and learn the game set, which is a wonderful game, I don't know how well that translates to finding recognition in code. This is actually something I do extremely well. I can see patterns in code very well, and I think that makes me a good developer, but I honestly have no idea how I develop that. Maybe it comes with practice, maybe not, but Definitely, if you know how to develop pattern recognition, you're good at it, you will be good at programming. Number 10, make good habits early. She talks about clean coding here, that it's better to get them ingrained at the start. And I have nothing against trying to write good code right from the start, but I have a bit of an issue with saying you have to ingrain this early because, quite honestly, what's a clean coding habit now may not be a clean coding habit in 5 years' time. There may be new things learned, languages change, frameworks evolve, even new paradigms come into play. And if you think somehow that you can learn some sort of fixed set of clean coding paradigms and stick with it, you're wrong. You're going to have to change them. And for evidence, most of the stuff I learned when I started programming, most of the clean coding patterns simply were not widely distributed at the time. All the clean coding I do now was learned much, much later in my career. And as long as you're willing to be flexible and adapt and learn new things, I think you should be okay at picking this up later. Number 11, identify your learning style. Again, back to that learning. Your career is going to be about learning, so it's best you figure out how you learn best. Number 12, struggle, but not too much. You have to learn to push yourself. You're going to have these problems that come up, and you can't immediately reach out for help. You have to learn to look through the documentation, push yourself a bit, try to understand it, look through the code, and just try and look for the solution yourself. But not too much. What not too much means is don't bang your head against the wall too long, because that will just get super frustrating. Reach out for help. Search for a mentor. If you need one, I'm available. And just find anybody that's going to help you get through it and look for advice. Number 13, get comfortable with failure. Oh yeah, that's get comfortable with failure. Let's just repeat that one. It's not so much that programming may be a direct path to success, it's basically an iteration of all the things that don't work and sticking with the ones that do. You need to be able to accept that things are going to break, things are going to go wrong, and even your best code is going to rot over time and not be the best solution. Just get used to it. 15. Some programming languages are easier than others. I'm going to say yes, but it's going to have a very different tone than what they answer here. There are some play languages that are just meant to exemplify some things, and there are some full-featured languages that can do a lot of things. If you pick a language which is not well suited to your domain, it will be harder. But overall, any of the full-featured languages, I don't think they're necessarily easier or harder than other ones. They expose different concepts, and eventually you have to learn those concepts. Now, if you're looking to get into programming, don't pick based on the language. Go back to that reason. What was your reason? And pick an environment. Pick a framework which helps you achieve that reason, and just take whatever language goes with it. And that's a secondary choice, and I think you'll get along just fine that way. Number 16, you don't need to know everything. You don't, you won't, you never will. Just live with it. Number 17, depth over breadth. This is an argument I've seen online a lot, and I'm a little bit uncertain here because I've seen how it's been applied. In theory, I'm okay with this notion that you should learn something, you should learn it really well, whether it be a programming language or framework. Really explore all its fringe features, understand everything it has to offer. Because if you just sit at the surface on a bunch of frameworks, you really won't get to know those corner cases. And those corner cases are what make programming interesting, unique, and make you a better developer. But at the same time, you can't ignore the breadth. You really have to look at those other languages, the other frameworks, the other tools, the other domains. If you don't, you're going to get focused on a single mindset, and that's a terrible place to be. You end up hearing people talk about things like a Java programmer or a Python programmer, and you don't want to be one of those people. It's okay to know Python and Java, but you shouldn't be a programmer that's stuck in those paradigms. There's a whole bunch of them to work with, and you should definitely learn a bit from all of them. 18. Focus on fundamentals first. And here she talks about things like loops, arrays, and iteration, the very basic stuff that programming languages are made of. And I'm going to wholeheartedly agree with this. You can't get anywhere without this, and I do a lot of interviewing, and I ask a very simple question that involves some of these basics, and I'm quite honestly still quite shocked at the number of people that fail these interviews simply because they do not know the basics. And without these basics, you're just going to struggle in absolutely everything. Learn the basics. In any language you use, make sure you know the basics, make sure you can use them well. And if you're doing an interview, brush up on all the basics and make sure you can get by that, because it's honestly quite embarrassing to see somebody not be able to do a basic for loop. 19. Get good at problem solving. In programming, problem solving can take many forms. In the most generic sense, it means that something in your library or framework doesn't achieve quite what you want it to do, and you're left in a situation where you have to piece together various other parts of the framework, or figure out the code, or how to put the pieces together, how to adapt the variables, how to adapt the flow, how to get what solutions are available, adapted and put together for your application. You'll have to read online, you'll have to look at many things, and I agree with this point very much. Problem solving is your career. This is what people value in you, and this is what you'll find most rewarding. Number 20, get good at researching. That's just a yes. I mean, because you can't remember everything. It's about that 100% knowledge. You can't know everything. You're not even going to know 1% of your field, 1% of your language. You're going to know virtually nothing, to be honest. Statistically, in the world of programming, I don't know very much. I look up everything. I look up all the APIs. I have to look up patterns. I have to look up security things. I recently wrote an article about, I don't even know how to do a website anymore. I would have to research a lot of basic things. But since I do have good fundamentals, that was a previous point, and I know how to do good research and I'm good at problem solving, it's very easy to pull this all together and make a program from scratch. Number 21, build projects you love. I think this one's kind of obvious as well. If you have an option on a project that between one you love and one you don't, pick the one you love. Except most of us are going to be exposed to projects that we don't necessarily like. So I'd like to change this point a little bit to change the project into one you love. Find the parts that are ignoring you. Find a way to change the problem to one that you find interesting to solve. This has to do with the problem solving point. Don't necessarily solve just the problem as presented. Rephrase the problem. Find an interesting way. Take that mundane detail, take the thing you've done 1,000 times, and find a new way to do it, and make it interesting to make sure that you can always work on projects, even if they're not in the top of your love list. 22. Compare yourself to only yourself. This is good advice for a new programmer. Do not look online to compare yourself to others. Do not pick those projects which are amazing and try to compare your code to them. Do not look too far. Just look at yourself internally and you'll know yourself. Are you getting better? You can use different ranking services. Doesn't matter what you do. Just, especially in the early stages, don't get flustered at what other people are doing. Just focus on whether you're getting better, whether you're enjoying it, and whether you're having a good time. 23. Do a bunch of code challenges. Yes. Whether these are in the form of sites that offer code challenges, items on Twitter, things from a book, or just little ideas you have on your own, push yourself to do a lot of different things. Find these little things and do them, and just always find these little things. Don't forget about them. Do them more and more and more and more. Try new things from start. Don't just keep working one project to the end. Find challenges, approach them, and this just goes towards the breadth of experience. Breadth is very good in getting exposure. 24. Celebrate your wins. I think this goes for all professions, across all walks of life. When you do something good, when you achieve something, don't be afraid to smile. Don't be afraid to celebrate. Go out and buy the food you like. Go out dancing. Do something to celebrate the fact that, hey, you did something. You got over that tough problem. You solved the crap that somebody shoved on you. You figured out that obscure documentation, that you got something working, because it feels good. And let yourself know that it feels good. Because when you hit the next rough time, you're going to reflect on that. You want those happy emotions to keep going and say, hey, look, there are good things. I'm going to find them again, and I'm going to be really happy about it. Number 25, programming is awesome. I have to agree. I wrote an article last year about I'm proud to be a programmer, and I'm going to stick by that. I mean, projects come and go. Some things are up and down, but overall, I love this profession, and it's great. There's so much you can do with it. There's so much breadth. There's always some more to explore. There's always new challenges around the corner, so I'll agree with that. Thank you to Spittel for the very nice article about these points that you should consider. And I mean, even if I had some counterpoints or some objections, they all generally stand. I just have a different take on things. I learned programming without a lot of the resources we had online. I may have learned a different way, but I generally stand by most of the stuff. And if you follow these points, you'll do very good. Even if you follow like only most of them, you'll get a good path to your development career and you won't be unhappy with it. So again, I'm edA-qa mort-ora-y. Thank you very much for watching.